Hi, welcome to Virtual Newsmakers. I'm Debbie Ellickson, and I'm here with my co-host, Cynthia Seymour, and our special guest from Brazil, Giovane Negrini. And he is a student in Cura- how do you Curitiba? Sorry,
Curitiba, yes.
Curitiba. And which is one of the host sites for the World Cup. And I'm just going to throw it over to you, Giovanni, and let you just tell us a little bit about yourself. You're taking computer engineering in school, and just a little bit about your background.
Uh, I'm actually from a small town called Jacarezinho, and then I moved out to Curitiba so I could study there, and I've been there for a little bit more than 2 years. Yeah.
Awesome. So we've I met you on a Google Hangout
Yeah,
last year, or about a year
I
and
think
over a
so.
year ago, over a year ago.
Yeah.
And we've talked a few times about stuff that's going on in your country, even through Facebook and Google Plus. And last year you had all those protests leading up to this World Cup, and have you been at one of those protests or?
Yes, I've been to two protests in Curitiba.
Okay. And just give us a little bit of a background on what's happening in your country right now. Uh, you've got this big world stage with the biggest game in the world. You've got probably the best football player or soccer player to us in North America in the world that comes from your team, and he's been a part of this organizing committee in a way. So tell us a little bit about a background leading up to this World Cup.
Yeah, when Brazil was chosen to host the World Cup, the president that time was Lula, and it's complicated talking about politics, but in my opinion, he's one of the best presidents Brazil ever had, and we were very optimistic at the time. But I have the feeling that we didn't think it through, I mean, the people, right? So as it started to get closer to the World Cup, people started to see that the stadiums were really high overrated in the prices, and we started to look at our country and all of the things going on, all the problems we have, and we were already unsatisfied about it. The health issues, education, and when we saw that amount of money paying to host a football event, people got really angry. And the breakthrough, the major point was that in São Paulo and a lot of other cities in Brazil, they decided to make the cost of the ticket to get a bus higher. So after that, protests all over the country started to blow.
Oh, so let's dive a little deeper into what's happening there, just to kind of give us some perspective. So the two of the main issues that we're hearing that people are upset about is that lack of funding is going into education and into the healthcare system. So what does it mean for a Brazilian if they need healthcare? So say you get sick, um, have something that you need instant Medicare for. What happens? How easy is it to get healthcare?
Um, yeah, Brazil is a huge country, so it depends a lot from region to region. And one of the biggest problems here is inequality. You understand? Yeah. But we have like a Sistema Único de Saúde. It's like a public health care, maybe like Obamacare. I don't know how it
Okay.
works there in the US, but you can just get your hospital and you'll get a service. If you're sick, it doesn't matter. But the quality,
It's interesting because Debbie's in Canada and I'm in the United States, and our healthcare systems are very different. The Canadians have a healthcare system that's available to all the Canadians,
and
whereas
free of
in the
charge.
United States, yeah, it's a very different scenario. So it's interesting that all three of us are on this talk right now.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So here we don't pay anything for SUS. Any Brazilian can be can be can go to the doctor and doesn't have to pay like anything using SUS. But the problem is that it takes a lot of time and you can literally die waiting. And so that's one of the biggest points people are really upset about it. And if you want to have a good healthcare, you need to pay it, and it's quite expensive too here.
Yeah. So yeah, we have long waiting lists here, and I think they do in the United States too. Although, yeah, after having been in the U.S., I'm very grateful for our system up here. But
Yeah, and also the hospitals here, well, I'd say that most of them are public hospitals. The state pays for it, and it's also not good.
So the quality of the public healthcare system is nowhere near where it should be, in your opinion.
Yes, I would give it a 5 to it, maybe 6, the maximum.
Let me ask you this: is it better to have a 5 or a 6 or a 0?
Yeah, it's definitely better to have a 5. Yeah. But also, I live in southern Brazil, and here it's like I'd say it's the most developed region in Brazil. So if you go north, it's worse.
Yeah. Curitiba is that I studied that in architecture school, and it was really interesting
Yeah.
because they talked a lot about it becoming the most sustainable city in the world. Did that come through? Did that happen?
I don't know, because Curitiba was very innovative in the 70s. So a lot of things we have now, they were actually made in that time, but they're still pretty good. So the city has a lot of parks and a lot of mobility infrastructure. It's one of the best cities to move in Brazil. I
Uh-huh.
mean, you have buses to everywhere, but nowadays I don't think it's that innovative anymore. And I think that the public transportation system, it's really, really full. So if you
Okay.
needed to go to work or to come back, and at those times everybody needed, it's kind of hard to get in the bus.
So
But
there
it's
was
still very sustainable.
so with these additional people coming in from the World Cup, what's that look like? Is it too many people in Curitiba?
Uh, well, it's not that much because Curitiba is hosting only 4 games. So they didn't get Curitiba didn't get any final games, so not much people. But I think the city has a good infrastructure,
Uh-huh.
so I think it's will be okay.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that people who go to Curitiba really like there.
so the big question then becomes, do we need to, as world citizens, take into consideration or define sort of what our priorities are? Because you're a millennial, correct? Would you consider yourself a millennial?
What's that?
Yeah, he
Uh,
is. Yeah, he'd be in his early 20s.
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, millennials are the generation kind of in college right now or hitting the workforce right now that have been exposed to but not necessarily born with digital communications, and we're kind of born around that turn of the century, so to speak. And it's really interesting because we kind of look at generational differences um, here on this show, but in this, you know, in this, just as demographics, and you know, it's always interesting to get that millennial point of view on the state of the world today and what your role is in it. If
Okay,
that,
so you want
So,
me to?
so
so for,
my question is basically, um, here you are um, in school, and you are looking at the world around you, and you live in a relatively, or what was a very innovative city, and now all of a sudden, you're coming into the world, and you've been a part of these protests, and the protests were because there was a priority given to sports um, events over the basic needs of the citizens of your own country. Is that correct?
Yeah, but I think that it was um, soccer is not really the problem, but it was like one of the major points that also got us to get angry about it, like it was just the start of it. I mean,
it offered the world stage. It offered a stage to actually be heard, didn't it?
yeah, that also, because people from all countries were looking, and yeah, so it was like an impulse to people really uh, take the time to fight it.
And that's a
Right.
good point that you just said too, because soccer is not the problem in the sense that
We still love
regardless,
soccer.
yeah, soccer is. Can you even okay, for those of us in North America who soccer is not our first, or football in your words is not our first love. For
Yeah.
those of us who like NFL football and NHL hockey, so if you could describe to a North American what this sport means to a Brazilian and to the country and to each individual that loves the game.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Soccer is the most popular sport here, anywhere you go, uh, and there involves a lot of money too. There are big teams, soccer players, earn a lot of money, and since we're born, we're like stimulated to play soccer. And like I was telling you before, it's a really simple sport. You just need something that looks like a ball, and you're kicking it. So even if you don't have money or if you don't have a ball, you will like have some sheets and just roll it over and start kicking. So children play it on the street since they're almost born. So it's very popular. But one thing that's quite interesting is that the demonstrations here also have been a lot of vandalism. People breaking things and stars and a lot of things. And but that doesn't only happen in the protests, because in Curitiba there are two big teams from there. Curitiba, the name of one, and the other is Atlético Paranaense. And when these two teams play against each other, they're, how do we call it? When you support a team, you are a,
Is it a rivalry or
a
Yeah,
supporter.
yeah. like
Yeah,
a competition.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are also a lot of fights between their fans, and they also break a lot of things. Like when you saw the buses after the game, there are a lot of broken windows. They are
Mm.
like vandalized with spray, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
just like it
Graffiti.
has happened in the protests.
Well, we do that here too in Canada. I mean, we saw riots in Vancouver after the my Bruins won the Stanley Cup in 2010, and we've seen it in the U.S. after in certain cities after Super Bowl win. People get kind of I don't even think it's the fans that do that stuff. It's kind of somebody takes that advantage of that opportunity to be a well, for lack of a better term, a dickhead. And
Yeah,
and then you get the mob mentality thing. Then you get some other dickheads that get together and join them, and just they're not necessarily fans. I don't think. I think they've done that here in Edmonton too. When the Oilers were in the Stanley Cup final, they didn't win, but there were some people that were notoriously doing some stuff like that, overturning cars and whatnot. And but they weren't even real Oiler fans. They were just people that are just being jerks.
yeah. But do you watch the game and support the team? Oh, okay.
With that,
Do they support the team?
oh, the people that are doing the damage, some of
Yeah.
them probably not. Yeah, some of them were just
Oh,
showing up there, and I think you get an element of that where there will be some fans that will be unruly, but I think there is a group of people that just take advantage of it. They just want to do stuff like that. So, which is unfortunate, and you'll see them do that in the protests too. They want to kind of put their mark on a protest. A protest can be very innocent and very calm, and nothing's going on that protests, and then you'll get this element that comes in there and puts everybody in a bad light because they're dickheads.
yeah, that's true. You know, but here, when they break things, usually are people that really support the team. They really go to the stadium and watch the
Mm,
games. Yeah. But in the protests, I don't think they're really protesting. You know, I think
yeah.
that the people who do that stuff in the protests, they are really just to break things.
Right.
Okay.
So one is more about civil disobedience, so to speak, and another one is about civic mindedness and expressing your greater wishes and needs for of your generational voice about the priorities of what you all see as important. Correct?
Yeah.
So, I guess my question is, this show is a lot about how technology is enabling us to have global conversations and really start to spread and share ideas in this world. And we've had the opportunity to talk with people from all over the world and get different points of view. My question for you is, how can you all, as the youth, start to really identify what your priorities are and start to express your priorities in a way that you get heard?
Yeah. I think that the protests in Brazil are interesting for that because the main tool we used to organize a protest were Facebook. So there were some organizations most of the time, like there's a famous one, Passe Livre,
Mm-hmm.
and they started creating events and inviting people. So my friends would invite me, and I would invite my friends, and through Facebook, all that people got together in the same place, and started to fight for what we believed. But at the same time, we weren't sure about what we believed, what we wanted. We just knew we wanted things different, and we know that we have problems in education and problems in public transport, but we're not yet quite sure what we want. We don't really have a plan. Like
Right.
Passe Livre is one of the organizations, and like their goal is to have like free public transport in Brazil. So they actually have a plan. They are very organized, but in terms of healthcare and education, we don't have quite a plan.
So, do you feel like
Okay.
you have a voice outside of these protests? Like, I know that the millennials in my country don't necessarily feel heard, and I think it's the same in the U.S. It's because you get, while our governments are all different in a way, I guess Canada and the U.S. are probably a little bit closer in how they they run their government, and certainly there's corruption on both on all sides. And but you get these people that go into office, and while they are voted in, it's like there's still a generation and a voice that doesn't seem to feel heard. So I think you get you get the protests, not necessarily in Canada, but in the U.S. You'll get people speaking up against it, and they take to social media to probably speak their mind. But do you feel in your generation as well in Brazil that you're being heard, that your voice is being heard by your government?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's been heard by our government.
That
That's the truth. Yeah. Uh, yeah.
I think we're in an I read an article the other day, and the guy that wrote it, I wish I could remember his name, but he called it the age of transformation. And we're at a really huge uh, juncture worldwide between the people who are currently running our governments that aren't listening to the real wants and needs of the people, and the people that need to that want to have a voice and have the technology to have a voice, but need to get a game plan together. Because the reality of the matter is, and I'm going to bring it right back to soccer or any sport, if you're going out there to play the game, you got to have leadership, you've got to have a team put together, you've got to have a common goal, you've got a strategy for you need a strategy for how you're going to win that game and how you're going to work together as a team. So from the sports perspective, I think that if you're the millennial generation, if you will, which I probably identify with a little bit more than the boomer generation,
totally.
mentally, physically, I'm in this like really weird, um, I don't know, limbo. But anyway, my point is that if this new generation can come in with a vision and develop out a strategy using these technologies, then you're more than just a bunch of people whining about problems, but the people that are creating solutions. And to me, when I studied Curitiba as an example of a city that had a vision, I mean, that is a city that was built on a vision. And it was a city built with the civic mindedness at the core of its values, the reasons why it was being built. Debbie, if you haven't, look up Curitiba as from like a city development, and it's a
Right.
super fascinating story. My point is that I think for this age of transformation to happen, we've got to get past whining and complaining and step up and work together to create great solutions.
And
And I
that's
think
all
that
of us.
needs to happen globally. This
I
is
think that's
not
every
just
generation
Brazil.
too. That's
Yeah.
every generation. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, like after the protest, our president made an announcement. I don't remember when, but saying that, do you know about the pré-sal, the petroleum they found here in Brazil
Oh, the oil and
under the
gas?
salt?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know in English, but it's like a lot of petroleum.
Yep.
And
I'm
our
from
president
Alberta.
said that, yeah, he said that like a great amount of it would go to education and healthcare.
Hmm.
But we still don't have a plan. You know? It's just a lot of money that she is saying that it will go to these
Yeah.
areas. But I think that's the biggest problem now. It's how to organize our fight through the social media. It's
And
not
I can
just getting together.
yeah.
I'm gonna step in and say maybe it's not about organizing the fights, but organizing the collaboration and the solutions. Because that is, I think, the real rub that's going on right now is they're not listening, and your voices aren't getting heard. But and there's that angst that happens in this world in between, which is that digital communication, social media world. If you were able to start to create, great revolutions have happened on manifestos, on John Stuart Mill writing philosophy, like all these incredible changes have happened, and the changes have happened historically based on technology change and change of philosophy, or a major shift in philosophy, and that is true across the board. So if you look at the past and what was successful with the previous ages of transformation, I think that there's a huge amount of potential and possibility for how these technologies could be used to forward the conversation instead of creating the battle.
Yeah, that's true.
And the other
You
thing
know?
too is what we've seen history has proven as well. Well, today we're in a wonderful place because of the technology and we can push out our messages a lot easier than we could in the past. But history has always proven that it really only takes one person to make a change. One
Yeah.
person gets the ball rolling, one person actually makes that difference.
I have a question for you guys, too. Because here there's
Uh-huh.
like people and politicians, and we feel very apart from each other. And politicians get really rich. And one sentence that was really repeated here is like, "Você não me representa. You don't represent me." Do you feel
Yeah.
represented by our
I
politicians?
would
No,
say that's a
absolutely
universal.
not.
Yeah,
Oh
and
yeah.
in Canada, absolutely not. In fact, I think that uh, from Canadian political perspective, um, the government here, the Conservative government, has taken liberties that because they don't have to answer, and once the Prime Minister doesn't have to answer to a Congress the same way that the president does in the U.S. And he's taken a few liberties up here to pass legislation without any feedback and without any conversations. And there's been he's got a real fight on his hand with the indigenous people here because just recently they approved this pipeline from Alberta, oil-rich Alberta, which is where I live, in oil country, where our fields are oil wells, or money fields are oil wells, and
Yeah.
so they've approved a pipeline from here to the coast, remote area of BC coast, so that they could ship oil by tanker to China, but the strait that the tankers, these super tankers, would have to travel in is like the most dangerous water on the planet. And, so you can see an economic, ecological nightmare waiting to happen.
Yeah.
So this
Hmm.
this was approved without any conversation with indigenous tribes whose land they are putting the pipeline on. So, so yes, we have the same issue here, and it, there's. I mean, it also depends on who you talk to. I mean, nobody's ever happy with,
Yeah, that's
if you
true.
voted the other way, you're never happy with the government that's in place, and there's always going to be issues. I think the system can be corrupt as much as, maybe the person goes into politics with the right mindset, but it's the system that doesn't allow them to make any changes. But you're right. I think it doesn't really matter what
In the
country
United
you come
States,
from.
it's a bit of a different situation here because we've become incredibly polarized, and
Oh,
nobody's happy. So there's no side that's actually happy with the political powers that be. And what goes on is that all of our politicians are being paid exorbitant amounts of money by the corporations. So they make decisions that benefit the corporations over benefiting the general populace as a whole, the citizens of this country. So when you are representing, in my opinion, when you're representing the corporations and not representing the people anymore, is anyone's really questioning? We're taught in American history and civics that we live in a democratic country, but I studied political science, and I'm starting to see such a huge shift that I question, what our real ideology of this country is. And I don't believe that the politicians represent the people at all. So, and that's my opinion. But I think
Hmm.
that there
I
are a
think
lot of people in
that's
this country that would share that same sentiment and distrust at this point of the government. They've lost their trust,
yeah, I agree.
and they are not
And
So
listening.
there in the
But they
in
are
the U.S. you
listening.
guys have like the yeah. There you guys have the Republicans and the Democrats, right?
Yeah.
yeah,
Is it the only two parties, or is it the biggest ones?
It's a two-party system primarily, and both sides are so opposite ends of the spectrum at this point. But what people don't realize is that both sides are benefiting from that corporate funding. And when that happens, it doesn't matter which side you vote on at all
Yeah.
anymore, because
yeah,
they're not there to legislate in your favor anymore.
yeah.
Yeah, the same here. And do people get involved in politics there? Do you
People
think
in
that
this
a major
country
American?
are people in this
Do you think?
country, I think, are getting more and more brainwashed by silly television shows, Dancing with the Stars, and with the Miami Heat games. You know what I mean? If they can keep us entertained, then they can, or on some kind of anti-anxiety medication or whatever, just to keep us like quiet, then
Yeah,
they've got us
that's what
under
happens.
control.
Well, therein lies the,
That's what happens with the World Cup here. Football.
yeah.
Everybody's paying attention to
Yeah.
the games, and this is in a year of elections. So who will
Was,
people vote?
was you
Yeah.
then when you're in that? Uh, I mean, when you look at your possibilities in the future, I mean, sometimes we look at the only way to make the change is to run or to have somebody run that speaks for you. So I mean, have you ever thought of running for? I know that I have. I've actually been involved personally in many political campaigns. I've door knocked for politicians. I've been a scrutineer at elections. I've been involved with campaigns from municipal, provincial, and federally. So, and I know Cynthia's been involved in a lot of
Very.
campaigns. And so, have So what about you, Giovane? Have you been involved in any campaigns, or does your government, or does it work that way there?
Yeah, that's kind of what I asked because here people don't interest about politics, and people also don't understand politics, you know.
Mm.
So that those people who understand it, they are in great advantage, you know. That's why they really get rich because they are the only people who care about it, but they use it to other intentions, you know. I think that's something that really needs to change here. To explain to people how our system works and how to get involved about it. Personally, I I have a very little knowledge about it, and I've never been involved in politics.
I have a suggestion, and the first, just from the standpoint of using this technology, the more people you can connect with and learn from, and share, greater the possibilities are going to be. So I guess it's a question of deciding, am I going to step up and be part of the solution, or am I just going to like watch a football game today? And sometimes some
Yeah,
people can do both, but I think a lot of people just would rather remain inactive than proactive.
yeah,
I'm
that's true. But we
suggesting.
also,
I would say the opposite is true for you if you've already been involved in some of these organ, you
but
know.
we also don't know how to get in, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
because to win an election, it's not enough to have good intentions, you have a good plan. You also need a lot of money.
Yeah,
And to
you
do
do.
that, you need to be supported either by a party or by a company.
Mm.
So,
Well,
Yeah.
I have a suggestion for you know, there's a series going on right now on CNN called The 60s, and the 60s, which I wasn't very old during the 60s, but it was a time, I see the time right now very similar to what it was like in the 60s. In the 60s, you had a lot of things culminating at the same time. You had the corruption of the Nixon government. You had the Vietnam War, which is wholly, highly unpopular, and and people coming home in body bags. You had um, you had Jim Crow legislation where you had white fountains and colored fountains. Uh,
Hmm.
so you had the civil rights, uh, and then you had the Kennedy shooting, and you had all this stuff culminating at the same time, which made it quite a unique experience. But I look at today and I think, because digital communications to me has almost separated, not necessarily generationally, because obviously we're all, the three of us come from different generations. So, but
Yeah.
we have the same philosophy and the mindset, because otherwise we wouldn't be here right now. But what I'm seeing is you've got I call it the analogs and the digitals. You've got these people who, I'm not going to be involved in digital communications, and you can't make me, because they see it as evil or something. They see it as a detrimental thing on society, whereas the rest of us are living in here and we're seeing all the greatness that happens from it.
Yeah.
So it's very much like the 60s, where you had the establishment and you had the youth, and you had the protests, you had the Kent State shootings and all this stuff. The youth were the ones that came up, and well, then it wasn't even just the youth, but they were part of that process with the civil rights movement and the end of the war. They all they weren't being heard, but they rose up and grew in numbers to the point where they made that change happen. So I think that's where we are now.
Yeah.
The change is happening. Whether they like it or not, the change is happening, and it's just a matter of the changing of the guards. It's like trying to stop the agricultural from changing into the industrial revolution. That was going to happen whether, no matter how much they dug their heels in the ground. So I see the change happening. I think the change will happen faster and better if we're talking about it and allowed to talk about it.
I'm excited for it. In fact, I love the fact that, I mean, to me, when I look at, the college students and and even the younger, the kids that are your kids' ages, Cynthia, I see, I mean, well, there's some people that may not, and the people that don't see the hope are the analogs. But I look at and I see the future. I see the people who are going to lead us, and we're going to support them to make that change. So we'll stand behind you with the flags and cheer you on as you win the next World Cup of politics or whatever. So.
Yeah.
No, I think the thing to do is to stay positive and proactive, and that would be my challenge. Like how to be very solution oriented and involved. And the more that this global conversation starts to grow and the ability for us to have these types of conversations grows, I think that the change is going to happen. It's just a matter of time.
And
That's
if it takes
all.
a football game to make it happen, what the
Since we were talking about generation, I think that social media played an important role about it because it wasn't reliable source to get information about the protests, and it was also the fastest. So during the protests, people were posting pictures in the Twitter about what was happening and pictures with the signs. But at the same time, the TV companies, they were showing just people breaking things.
Yeah.
So the generations like my dad's, they were watching by the TV and they were thinking like, oh, these people just want to break things. So those who were connected in the social media, they really knew what was going on.
Right.
And after a lot of pressure in social media, the TV channels started to actually explain what people were doing and interview the organizers of the events and etc.
I think that to a lesser degree, or maybe to a higher degree, that same dynamic was going on or is going on still in Venezuela, because there's a huge amount of protest and discord with what's going on in Venezuela. But the thing is the media is only the traditional media is only telling one story, and it's the state-sanctioned or politically sanctioned stories. I think that happens here to a certain degree, and I think that social media is threatening to these existing powers because then suddenly the people do have a voice.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's really interesting. The same thing has gone on in Turkey. There's been great efforts to try to shut down YouTube and Twitter. And, this is similar things have gone on in Thailand. I mean, around the world, the Ukraine, another example. We're experiencing this change because of social media in a lot of ways, and because of the technologies that we have. So I just, this has really been, these are exciting times. I know it's weird because we can't see so far into the future because it's changing so quickly that we can't really get a grasp on what's really going on here. And I think that's everywhere.
So what would our challenge of the week be?
Our challenge?
Yeah, we do a challenge of the week every week.
Okay.
So what would you challenge somebody to do this week, Giovane?
Uh, Talking about what?
If you could challenge people this week to do one thing to make a difference, one thing to
Even
make
if
a difference,
Whoa.
what would it be?
cheer for Brazil.
Yeah, I think that considering what we've talked about here, I would say get involved in politics. That is the challenge.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, but my question is it really get involved in politics or get involved in the change?
Well, you can get both. I mean, both. I mean, you can get involved in politics by actually, how about this? The challenge of the week to get involved in politics by actually learning a little bit more about how about the politics that's happening in your country, in your city, in your state, and not from the mainstream media, but from maybe from the social media, and get more than just the one perspective on politics, and then that helps shape how you want to change it.
Yeah, because that's an important way to change things.
Yeah. Well, these are exciting times. That's all I can say.
They are. So, have you gone to getting back to the World Cup, have you gone to any of the games? Or are you
No,
planning on it?
I have not, but a couple of friends of mine have gone, and people are really really excited about the World Cup, and we're all watching it while still having protests. But it's like it's soccer. We love it, right? So we're also watching people going to the games. Yeah.
You know what? I'm watching, a lot of the reason I watch it is because I have a personal involvement in it because I know you, and the games are in
Go
Brazil. So
Brazil.
that opens up my interest immediately because of this global connection. And prior to that, the World Cup before that, a Facebook friend who was on the World Cup bid committee for the U.S., he was in South Africa, and that was enough to get me to watch some of those games there. So that also grew my interest in the World Cup. So this global connection um, has helped me open my my interest to see what's going on in my friend's country.
Yeah, that's nice. If you ever come to Brazil, you really should do it in a World Cup period because the atmosphere here is so amazing. Like everybody talk about it. Yeah, you gotta like football, but everybody talk about the games and Brazil and stuff. And the families get together, invite their friends to watch the games with, and people decorate their house. It's so amazing.
So 4 years from now, Cynthia and I will come to Brazil and
Yes, come. And also to
watch
Curitiba.
watch a game in the bar with you.
Wait, will you do us a favor? Will you get some pictures while you're out and about with your phone and attach them to this page so we can see um, all the things that are going on? Because I'd love to see that world from your perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah, I will.
that'd be
It's very
awesome.
nice.
Awesome.
Nice,
Very
nice.
That's terrific.
Thank you so much. This is really fun. I really, every week I look forward to these because we get a chance to speak with various people all over the world, and my dream is to get everybody into one place at some point. So we might have to have a big party somewhere.
Yeah.
Exactly. Brazil sounds like a nice place. So's Miami.
You know what? World Cup mania has hit Miami. I mean, it almost eclipsed the whole Miami Heat thing, even though they lost. I guess it was a good thing nobody noticed because they were all cheering on the World Cup teams instead.
Yeah, that happens.
Well, this has been great. So if next week we have, speaking of World Cup, we have some Portugal fans on.
Good.
We have an author of Transmedia 2.0 next week, and so we're going to talk about transmedia storytelling. And so if you like our show, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. In the meantime, thank you for coming on our show, Giovane. It has been fun. And
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to end the broadcast here.